A billionaire CEO, Liam, faces a gut-wrenching choice. Defy his family's racist legacy to marry Renee, the brilliant black woman he loves, or lose everything. In a single night, he crumbles, choosing wealth over her heart. Will he find the courage to fight for her? Where are you listening from? Chicago, London, or maybe Los Angeles? Drop a comment below and share. What do you think happens next? Hit that subscribe button to catch every twist in our upcoming stories, and let's build this community together. Stay tuned. Secrets unravel, and you won't believe how this ends. Comment, subscribe, and let's ignite this tale together. The Chicago skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harrison Technologies' boardroom, a cathedral of glass and steel perched 30 stories above the city. Inside, the air hummed with the quiet tension of power. Executives in tailored suits, their pens poised over leather-bound notebooks, waiting for the next act in the corporate theater. At the head of the polished mahogany table sat Liam Harrison, the 35-year-old CEO whose chiseled jaw and piercing blue eyes graced the covers of Forbes and Society pages alike. His navy suit was impeccable, his posture commanding, but his mind was elsewhere, adrift in a sea of expectations that had long since drowned his own dreams. Liam was the heir to a dynasty built on tradition, where every decision, from the stocks he traded to the women he dated, was dictated by his parents' obsession with legacy. Last night's dinner at their Lake Forest estate still lingered like a bitter aftertaste. His mother, Evelyn, had sipped her Chardonnay and mused about Claire Wentworth, the blonde heiress whose pedigree was as flawless as her smile. "She's perfect for you, Liam," Evelyn had said, her voice a velvet blade. "A Harrison needs a wife who elevates the name." His father, Charles, had nodded, his eyes cold as the marble busts lining their foyer. "Don't disappoint us, son." Now as the boardroom clock ticked toward 9 a.m., Liam's thoughts were a tangle of duty and discontent. He barely registered the agenda his assistant had slipped him. A new marketing consultant was presenting today. Another routine performance, he assumed. Another expert to dazzle the room with buzzwords and charts. He stifled a yawn, adjusting his cufflinks, when the heavy oak door swung open. And then she walked in. Renee Washington was a vision, not in the calculated way of society debutantes, but with a presence that seemed to shift the room's gravity. Her long black hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that was both striking and serene, her deep brown eyes alive with intelligence and warmth. At 32, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of her success. Her tailored black blazer and cream blouse were understated, yet she commanded attention without trying. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound as she strode to the front, her smile professional but disarming, like sunlight breaking through a storm. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice clear and melodic, cutting through the room's sterile hum. "I'm Renee Washington, and today I'm here to show you how Harrison Technologies can redefine its future." Liam's boredom evaporated. He leaned forward, his pen forgotten, as Renee launched into her presentation. Her slides were sharp, her data meticulous, but it wasn't the numbers that held him captive, it was her. She spoke with a passion that made the company's brand feel alive, as if it were a living, breathing entity with a soul. Her ideas were bold, a campaign to humanize the tech giant, to connect with communities, to break from the cold, corporate mold. She gestured with grace, her words weaving a vision so vivid Liam could almost see it unfolding. What struck him most, though, was how she engaged the room. She didn't just address the C-suite, she turned to a junior analyst, a nervous young woman clutching her notes. "What's your take on our current outreach, Sarah?" Renee asked, her tone inviting, not patronizing. Sarah stammered, then offered a hesitant idea. Renee nodded, her eyes lighting up. "That's a great point. Let's build on that." The room seemed to exhale, the hierarchy momentarily dissolved by her inclusivity. In Liam's world, consultants kissed up to the man signing the checks. Renee treated everyone like they mattered. He watched mesmerized as she fielded questions from the CFO with razor-sharp precision, her responses laced with both expertise and charm. Her laughter when a VP made a dry joke was warm, unforced, and it sent an unexpected jolt through Liam's chest. He caught himself staring, not at her slides, but at the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. the way her hands moved like a conductor shaping a symphony. She was brilliant, beautiful, and utterly unimpressed by the wealth or status that defined his existence. As she wrapped up, the room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in murmurs of approval. "Thank you, Ms. Washington," Liam said, standing to shake her hand. His voice was steady, but his pulse wasn't. Her grip was firm, her skin warm against his, and their eyes locked for a beat longer than necessary. "That was impressive," he added, the word feeling inadequate. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," she replied, her smile professional, but with a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps. She gathered her materials with the same grace she'd brought to the presentation, and as she left, the room felt dimmer, as if she'd taken the light with her. Liam sat back down, his mind reeling. He told himself it was professional admiration. Renee Washington was exceptional at her job. That was all. But as the meeting droned on, he couldn't shake the image of her standing there, a beacon in a world of gray suits and predictable scripts. For the first time in years, he felt awake, as if a part of him long buried had stirred. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that fleeting handshake, that spark in her eyes, had set something in motion, something that would unravel the carefully constructed life he'd always known. And somewhere deep down, a voice whispered, "This is dangerous." The fluorescent lights of Harrison Technologies' conference room buzzed softly, casting long shadows over the scattered papers and cooling coffee cups. It was past 7 p.m., and the office was a ghost town, save for Liam Harrison and Renee Washington, hunched over a laptop, dissecting the latest marketing campaign. Liam, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, felt a strange thrill in these late hours, not from the work, but from her. Renee's presence was a quiet fire, warming the sterile space with her focus and warmth. Her long black hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands framing her face as she scribbled notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "See here," she said, pointing to a graph, her voice steady but alive with conviction. "If we pivot to community-driven ads, we'll hit a demographic you've been missing." Her eyes met his, bright with the kind of passion that made numbers feel like poetry. Liam nodded, but his mind wasn't on the data. It was on the way her fingers brushed the paper, the way her laughter earlier had filled the room when he'd fumbled a joke about their outdated slogan. These late-night strategy sessions had become their ritual in the weeks since her presentation. Liam, the 35-year-old CEO bound by his family's iron grip, found excuses to extend Renee's contract. New projects, revised proposals, anything to keep her close. He told himself it was her expertise, her ability to see his company's soul in ways his own team couldn't. But deep down, he knew it was more. Renee at 32 was a force, brilliant, grounded, and utterly unaware of the effect she had on him. Every meeting chipped away at the walls he'd built around his heart, walls erected by years of his parents' expectations and their relentless talk of suitable wives. One evening, as rain streaked the office windows, their conversation drifted from market trends to something personal. Renee leaned back, cradling her coffee mug, and spoke of her childhood in a small Ohio town. "I worked nights at a diner, mornings at a gas station, just to pay for college," she said, her voice soft but unapologetic. "Every dollar was a step toward something bigger." Her eyes held a quiet pride, a hunger Liam recognized but had buried under his family's wealth. "You're lucky," she added, glancing at him. "You've got the resources to take risks, to build whatever you dream." Liam's laugh was hollow. "Lucky?" He set down his pen, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. "Every choice I make is filtered through what my family wants. Freedom's the one thing I don't have." His parents' voices echoed in his mind, his mother's polished insistence on Claire Wentworth, his father's cold warnings about legacy. Marrying beneath their class, especially outside their race, was unthinkable. He'd lose the company, the inheritance, their name. Renee tilted her head, studying him with those piercing brown eyes. "Sounds like a cage," she said, not with pity, but with a clarity that cut through his defenses. For a moment, he felt seen, not as the Harrison heir, but as Liam, a man drowning in a life he hadn't chosen. That night, he lay awake in his penthouse. the city's glow mocking his restlessness. He couldn't stop thinking about her, her strength, her warmth, the way she made him want to be more than his last name. By morning, he'd made a decision, small but seismic. He'd ask her for coffee, just coffee. Nothing threatening, nothing that crossed the lines he wasn't ready to admit existed. The next day, as they wrapped up a meeting, his heart pounded like a teenager's. "Renee," he said, his voice betraying him with a slight crack, "would you like to grab coffee sometime to discuss the campaign or just talk?" The words tumbled out, clumsy and raw. She raised an eyebrow, a playful smile curving her lips. "Just talk?" Her tone was light, but her eyes held a spark that made his pulse race. They met at a small cafe in Wicker Park, far from the glittering towers of Liam's world. The place was cozy, with mismatched chairs and the scent of roasted beans. Renee arrived in a soft yellow sweater, her hair loose, her presence like a warm breeze. She slid into the seat across from him, her smile disarming. "This is nice," she said, glancing around. "I was worried you'd pick some fancy place with waiters calling you sir." Liam laughed, louder than he meant to, his nerves easing. "I saved those for people I'm trying to impress." "And you're not trying to impress me?" she teased, sipping her latte. He was desperately, but he shrugged, playing it cool. "Just trying to be normal." The word felt foreign, but with her it seemed possible. They talked for 2 hours, about jazz, her love for painting, his secret wish to write poetry. Her laughter was a melody, her stories a window into a life built on grit and dreams, so different from his world of privilege and obligation. Their coffee dates became a quiet rebellion. Liam chose discreet spots, claiming it was for convenience, but the truth was cowardice. He couldn't risk his family's spies, society gossips, or hired eyes, spotting him with her. One afternoon, he stopped at a florist, agonizing over what to buy. Roses felt too bold, too obvious. He chose a small bouquet of pink roses, delicate and understated, and handed them to her after a meeting. "For your work on the campaign," he said, his cheeks flushing. "Roses, huh?" Renee inhaled their scent, her eyes twinkling. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Harrison." She didn't call him out, but her gaze held a question, one he wasn't ready to answer. As they parted, Liam watched her walk away, the roses tucked under her arm, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. He was falling for her, hard, and it terrified him. Each meeting, each laugh, pulled him deeper into a truth he couldn't face. He was living a lie, and the longer he kept her a secret, the more he risked losing the one thing that made him feel alive. The autumn air carried a crisp bite as Renee Washington and Liam Harrison stepped out of Harrison Technologies' sleek tower into the twilight glow of Chicago. It was well past 8, their latest strategy session having stretched into the evening, as they often did. The city pulsed around them, honking cabs, the chatter of pedestrians. But for Liam, the world narrowed to Renee. Her long black hair swayed as she walked, catching the light of street lamps, and her laughter, bright and unguarded, cut through the urban din. She was midway through a story about a disastrous college art project, her hands animating the tale, when Liam realized he was barely listening. He was watching her, drinking in the way her eyes sparkled, the way her presence made the city feel alive. At 35, Liam was a man accustomed to control, his life a carefully curated performance for his family's legacy. His parents' voices were a constant shadow, his mother's polished insistence on a proper wife, his father's warnings about preserving the Harrison name. But with Renee, those voices faded. She was 32, a marketing consultant whose brilliance matched her warmth, and in her company, Liam felt a version of himself he'd long forgotten. A man who could dream, who could feel. They'd fallen into a rhythm these past weeks, their connection growing in stolen moments. Liam suggested a walk to clear their heads, and Renee agreed, her smile teasing. "Trying to avoid more spreadsheets, Mr. Harrison?" she quipped, pulling her scarf tighter. They wandered toward the Chicago River, its surface a canvas of reflected city lights, the water's gentle lap a counterpoint to the evening's energy. The path was quiet, lined with bare trees and the occasional jogger, and Liam felt a reckless freedom in the anonymity of it all. Here he wasn't the CEO, the Harrison heir. He was just Liam, walking beside a woman who made his heart race. Renee's stories flowed effortlessly, her love for old jazz records, a cross-country road trip to see the Pacific, the way her father used to hum while fixing cars. Liam hung on every word, marveling at her resilience, her life so different from his world of marble halls and orchestrated futures. He shared fragments of himself, tentative at first, a boyhood dream of sailing, a poem he'd written and hidden from his father's scorn. Renee listened, her gaze steady, and for the first time, he felt his secrets were safe. They stopped by a railing overlooking the river, the city's skyline a glittering fortress against the indigo sky. Renee leaned against the metal, her breath visible in the cool air, and turned to him. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. The question hit Liam like a blade, slicing through the armor he wore. He wanted to tell her everything, how his family's expectations were a noose, how every gala, every arranged date was a step further from himself. But the words caught in his throat, tangled in fear. Instead, he looked at her, really looked. Her face was a study in contrast, strength in her jaw, softness in her eyes, and a beauty that wasn't just skin deep, but woven into her spirit. The wind tugged a strand of hair across her cheek, and without thinking, Liam reached to brush it away. His fingers lingered, grazing her skin, and time seemed to pause. Renee's eyes widened, but she didn't pull back. The air between them crackled, charged with a truth neither had dared name. "You're incredible," Liam said, his voice raw, the words spilling out like a confession. Before fear could stop him, he leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were soft, warm against the autumn chill, and for a moment she hesitated, as if weighing the risk. Then she kissed him back, her hands finding his coat, pulling him closer. The world dissolved. No family, no legacy, no expectations. Just them, just this, the river murmuring its approval. When they parted, Renee's breath was uneven, her eyes searching his. "Liam," she whispered, his name a melody that anchored him. He wanted to say something, to promise her everything, but the weight of his double life pressed down. He was a coward, hiding her from his world, choosing discreet corners over public light. Yet in that moment, with her so close, he let himself believe they could be enough. They lingered by the river, hands brushing, words unnecessary. Renee's laughter returned, lighter now, as she teased him about his terrible sense of direction. Liam grinned, the sound of her voice a lifeline. They walked back toward the city, their steps slow, as if reluctant to leave this fragile bubble. But as they neared the tower, reality crept in. Liam's phone buzzed, a reminder of a gala he'd skipped, a message from his mother about Claire Wentworth. He silenced it, but the guilt was a cold weight in his chest. Renee glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. He nodded, forcing a smile, but the lie tasted bitter. He was falling for her, deeper with every moment, and it was a dangerous path. His family would never accept her, and the thought of their venom touching her made his stomach churn. Yet as he watched her adjust her scarf, her silhouette framed by the city's glow, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not yet. The Amalfi Coast unfurled before Renee Washington and Liam Harrison like a dream painted in golden azure. The cliffside villa they'd rented clung to the hillside, its terrace draped in bougainvillea, overlooking a sea that shimmered under the Italian sun. It was their first escape together, a stolen week far from Chicago's relentless pulse and the suffocating weight of Liam's family. Here, the 35-year-old CEO wasn't the Harrison heir, bound by his parents' obsession with legacy. He was just Liam, a man intoxicated by love, walking hand in hand with Renee, the 32-year-old marketing consultant whose laughter was his compass. Renee was radiant, her long black hair catching the breeze as they wandered through Positano's pastel-hued streets. Her sundresses, flowing, vibrant, seemed to dance with her steps, and her eyes, warm and alive, held a joy that made Liam's heart ache. She'd left her work phone behind, a rare surrender, and her presence was unshackled, her stories spilling out as they sipped limoncello in cliffside cafes. She spoke of her dream to start her own agency, her voice fierce with ambition. and Liam marveled at her fire, so different from the calculated polish of his world. Their days found a perfect rhythm. Mornings began with walks along pebbled beaches, Renee's fingers laced with his, her teasing laughter echoing as she splashed him with seawater. Afternoons were spent in the villa's pool, her playful dives pulling him into games that left them breathless with joy. Evenings brought dinners on their terrace, the sky ablaze with sunset, her face glowing in candlelight as they shared dreams they'd never dared voice. Liam felt alive, unburdened by the Harrison name, the gala invitations, the whispers of Claire Wentworth, his mother's chosen bride. One night, as a distant violin wove through the air from a nearby trattoria, they danced barefoot on the terrace. Renee's white dress flowed like moonlight, her body swaying against his, her warmth a tether to something real. The stars above were a tapestry, and Liam's heart pounded with a certainty he'd never known. He stopped dancing, his hands framing her face, her eyes locking with his. "Marry me," he said, the words raw, urgent. "I know it's crazy, Renee, but I can't imagine my life without you." "I won't." She froze, her breath catching, her gaze searching his for doubt. The silence stretched, a fragile thread, and Liam's pulse thundered. Then her lips curved into a smile, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. "Yes, Liam." He kissed her, fierce and tender, under the endless stars, and for that moment, the world was theirs, perfect, untouchable. But paradise was fleeting. Back in Chicago, reality struck like a winter gale. They'd barely stepped off the plane when Liam's phone lit up with a voicemail from his mother, Evelyn. "Come to the estate, now!" Her voice hissed, sharp as broken glass. Liam's stomach churned as he drove to the Lake Forest mansion, its looming columns a monument to his family's control. Renee stayed behind, unpacking with a smile that didn't know the storm awaiting them. He envied her ignorance, hated himself for what he feared was coming. The study was a crypt of dark wood and old money, portraits of stern Harrison ancestors glaring from the walls. Evelyn sat ramrod straight, her Chanel suit immaculate, her eyes cold. His father, Charles, stood by the fireplace, his face a mask of fury. "Who is she?" Evelyn demanded, her words slicing the air. Someone had seen them, perhaps a society contact at O'Hare, perhaps a hired eye. "A Harrison does not parade around with her kind," Charles spat, the racism in his tone a physical blow. Liam's fist clenched, but his voice stayed silent. He wanted to scream, to defend Renee, to tell them her brilliance, her heart, made their legacy look small. But fear, the same fear that had kept him compliant for years, choked him. They laid out their plan. An engagement to Claire Wentworth, blonde and pedigreed, was non-negotiable. "Refuse and you're finished," Charles said, his voice low, lethal. "No company, no inheritance, no name. You'll be nothing." Evelyn's gaze was a scalpel. "This fling ends tonight, Liam. Do you understand?" The word fling twisted in his gut, cheapening the love that had reshaped him. He thought of Renee, waiting at his penthouse, her laughter, her trust. He thought of the ring he hadn't yet bought, the future he'd promised. But the weight of his family's empire, the life he'd always known, pressed down like a tombstone. He nodded, a single cowardly gesture, and the room seemed to darken. Charles's lips curled in satisfaction. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed, but Liam felt a part of himself die. As he drove back to the city, the skyline blurred through unshed tears. Renee was his light, his truth, but his family's venom was a poison he wasn't strong enough to fight. Not yet. He gripped the steering wheel, the echo of her yes clashing with his parents' threats, and wondered how he'd face her, knowing he was already failing the woman he loved. The penthouse was a mausoleum of glass and chrome, its silence broken only by the soft clink of wine glasses as Renee Washington set the table. Candlelight flickered, casting shadows across her face, her long black hair loose and glowing. She hummed a jazz tune, her smile radiant with hope, a stack of wedding magazines tucked beside a vase of lilies. Liam Harrison stood in the doorway, his heart a lead weight in his chest. Hours earlier, his parents' words had carved him hollow. Refuse, and you're nothing, his father had said. This fling ends tonight, his mother had demanded. Their racism, their threats to strip him of his inheritance, his company, his name, had left him reeling. At 35, Liam was a billionaire CEO, but in that moment, he was a coward, clutching the edge of a choice that would define him. Renee turned, her eyes brightening. You're back. I was thinking we could look at venues tonight. Maybe something by the lake? Her voice was a melody full of a future she believed in. Liam's throat tightened, the weight of his family's ultimatum crushing his resolve. He wanted to tell her he'd fight, that her love was worth more than their empire. But the fear of losing everything, of dragging her into their venomous world, choked him. We need to talk, he said, his voice a stranger's, flat and cold. Renee's smile faltered, her hands stilling on the table. He forced the words out, each one a betrayal. We're moving too fast. I'm not ready. Maybe we should take a break. The lie tasted like ash, but he couldn't tell her the truth, that he was choosing wealth over love, security over courage. Her face paled, her eyes searching his, but she didn't cry. I understand, she said softly, her voice steady despite the hurt. I always knew this was too good to be true. She gathered her bag, her dignity a quiet shield, and left without looking back. The door's click echoed like a gunshot, leaving Liam alone with his shame. The months that followed were a descent into darkness. Liam threw himself into the engagement with Claire Wentworth, the blonde heiress his parents had chosen. She was everything they wanted, polished, well-bred, a perfect ornament for the Harrison legacy. At 28, Claire was beautiful in a curated way, her smiles practiced, her conversation pleasant but hollow. Being with her was like wearing a suit tailored for someone else, functional but suffocating. Every gala, every posed photo for the society pages was a reminder of what he'd lost. He smiled for cameras, shook hands with senators, but inside he was unraveling, his heart a ghost, haunting his own life. Work became his refuge, a place to drown the memories of Renee. He stayed at the office until midnight, took calls at dawn, anything to avoid the penthouse where her laughter still lingered. But Chicago was cruel, its streets lined with echoes of her, the cafe where they'd first talked, the florist where he'd bought her roses, the river path where he'd kissed her. He heard through a colleague that Renee had launched her own marketing firm, her talent shining brighter without him. Pride stung as much as pain. She was thriving, building her dreams while he played the part of a man he despised. The breaking point came at a charity gala, the kind of glittering affair his mother orchestrated to flaunt the Harrison name. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers and black-tie elegance. Claire at his side in a silver gown, her arm looped through his as she charmed donors. Liam felt nothing, his smile a mask, his mind numb to the clink of champagne flutes. He excused himself, stepping onto the terrace for air, the city's pulse a faint hum below. That's when he saw her. Across the street, Renee walked with a man, tall, handsome, his laughter mingling with hers. Her hair shimmered under the streetlights, her red dress hugging her curves, her joy a blade to Liam's heart. She was radiant, her smile unguarded, and the man beside her looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. Liam stood frozen, his tuxedo a mockery of his wealth, his engagement a lie. The truth hit him like a tidal wave. He'd lost her, and she'd found happiness without him. The abyss yawned beneath him, and for the first time, he saw himself clearly, a man who'd traded love for a hollow crown. That night, he called off the engagement. Claire's shock was polite, her family's outrage swift, but Liam didn't care. The society pages feasted on the scandal, his parents' fury a firestorm. His father's voice was venom. You've destroyed us. His mother wept for their tarnished legacy. But as Liam stood in his empty penthouse, the city's skyline a silent witness, he felt a strange relief. He'd sold his cars, liquidated assets, and started a new company from scratch. A small, scrappy venture built on his own terms. The work was grueling, the future uncertain, but for the first time, he was free. Free to fail, free to rebuild, free to mourn the woman he'd let go. And as he stared at the city, he knew he wasn't done fighting. Not for her, not yet. The auditorium at the Chicago Industry Summit buzzed with the low hum of anticipation, a sea of business leaders in crisp suits and sharp dresses filling the rows. Liam Harrison stood backstage, his palms damp, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. At 36, he was no longer the polished heir of Harrison Technologies, but the founder of a scrappy startup, built from the ashes of his family's empire. The stage was set for his keynote, but this wasn't about market trends or innovation. This was about truth, about her, about Renee Washington, the woman he'd lost and was desperate to win back. The lights dimmed and Liam stepped into the spotlight, his navy blazer a stark contrast to the tuxedos of his past. The crowd hushed as he gripped the podium, his blue eyes scanning the faces until they found her. Renee sat near the front, her long black hair cascading over a tailored emerald dress, her posture poised but tense. At 33, she was a celebrated entrepreneur, her marketing firm the talk of the industry. Her beauty was undimmed, but her eyes held a guarded edge, a scar from the pain he'd caused. "I've spent my life chasing success," Liam began, his voice steady but raw. "But today I'm here to talk about failure, about letting fear and privilege dictate my choices." The room was silent, every word a stone dropped into still water. He spoke of his family's legacy, their racist demands that he marry within their circle, their threats to disown him. He spoke of love, how he'd found it with a woman whose brilliance and heart outshone their wealth, and how he'd betrayed her. "I chose comfort over courage," he said, his gaze locking with Renee's. "I lost the most important person in my life because I was too weak to fight for her." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Renee's face was unreadable, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Liam's throat tightened, but he pressed on. "We celebrate disruption in business, but how many of us disrupt our own lives? I'm standing here because I'm done running from the truth. I'm sorry and I'm trying to be better." The applause was hesitant, then thunderous, but Liam barely heard it. He stepped off the stage, his heart pounding, unsure if his words had reached her. The speech went viral, not for its business insights, but for its raw honesty. Clients dropped his startup, stocks dipped, and his parents issued a public statement disowning him entirely. But none of it mattered when Renee found him later at the hotel bar, the clink of glasses a faint backdrop to her approach. "That was bold," she said, sliding onto a stool, her voice cautious but warm. "It was the truth," Liam replied, his eyes searching hers. "Long overdue." They talked until the bar emptied, the city's glow filtering through the windows. Liam apologized for the secrecy, the cowardice, the night he'd shattered her trust. He told her about his new company, built on merit, not legacy, about the modest apartment he now called home, about the man he was becoming, free from his family's chains. Renee listened, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, her expression softening but guarded. "I'm proud of you," she said finally, her voice low. "But I'm scared, Liam, scared of being hurt again." He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "Give me a chance to prove I've changed, not as the Harrison heir, just as Liam, who's crazy about you." Her silence was a tightrope, but then she smiled, fragile but real. "Just coffee?" she asked, an echo of their first date. "Just coffee," he agreed, his heart reigniting. Rebuilding trust was a slow dance, each step deliberate. Liam courted Renee openly, no longer hiding from prying eyes. He brought her to industry dinners, introduced her to colleagues as the woman he loved, stood proudly as cameras flashed at gallery openings. The society pages whispered, but he didn't care. His family's rejection was a wound, but it freed him to love without reservation. Renee noticed the change. "You're lighter," she said one evening, strolling through a park lit by fireflies. "Like you're finally you." "I'm free," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Free to choose you." 9 months later, they married by Lake Michigan, the water a mirror of the dawn sky. Renee was breathtaking in a simple white gown, her hair adorned with tiny daisies, her smile a beacon. The ceremony was small, surrounded by friends who saw them for who they were, not what they represented. Renee's father, a retired mechanic with calloused hands and a heart of gold, pulled Liam aside. You hurt her once, he said, his voice firm but kind. Don't make me regret this. I won't, sir, Liam vowed, his eyes on Renee. She's my world. Their life together was a tapestry of love and partnership. Renee's firm soared, reshaping the industry. Liam's startup grew, fueled by innovation, not privilege. Their home was filled with art, laughter, and quiet evenings where they dreamed together. Liam knew the pain of losing her had forged him, teaching him to fight for what mattered. Love wasn't a gift. It was a choice made every day, and he chose Renee with every breath. And that's the story of Shadows of Courage, a journey of love, loss, and the bravery to choose what's real. What did you think of Liam and Renee's story? Did it spark something in you? Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, your favorite moment, or maybe a time you fought for love. Your stories light up this community. A huge thank you for joining us today. Your support means the world. If you love this tale, hit that subscribe button to catch every new episode of Tales That Ignite. Let's keep the fire burning together. Until next time, keep chasing courage, and I'll see you in the next story.